A week and a half has gone by, essentially 2 weeks actually have gone by in this month of October, and there is still no deal.
I don't think anybody should be surprised, particularly investors, Brad, about what's happening related to stimulus. President Trump wants it. Nancy Pelosi says she wants it. And then you have Mitch McConnell over at the Senate saying not going to happen. So because you don't have all three pointed in the same direction, I don't see how this gets done before the election, which means, and maybe after the election for quite some time, depending on how this all plays out. So I think that investors have to get used to the idea that we're not going to see stimulus until sometime into November, maybe much later. And even though the markets want it, the people need it, the politicians don't see it as an advantage to get it done, therefore, it's not going to get done.
Okay, and so with all of this in mind, as we think about what a potential contested election might be for the markets in terms of volatility, what are you watching out for there as we go into one of the most contentious, perhaps, elections of our lifetimes, at least, where we've got both sides amping up all of the rhetoric coming into this, and we've got competing town halls even taking place tonight?
Things are certainly heating up, Brad. And we're going to see plenty more happening out there between now and Election Day. I mean, there's plenty of time for craziness. So let's not be surprised by anything. But here's what I see. I think that people need to move a little bit away from the personalities of the candidates. And I'm not saying that aimed at President Trump per se. I think that you have to really look at what are they putting forth? Now, I am a CPA, so I think a lot about tax law. And the tax code picks winners and losers. And you have to look at what each is proposing, because they are proposing vastly different tax plans. And because of that, there's going to be an impact on everyone. So who's going to be the winner? Who's going to be the loser? Well, I think investors are going to be looking very carefully on what the outcome of the potential tax changes are going to be, because it could be very, very significant for investors.
And thinking of the corporate, from an accounting perspective, what does that leave us in terms of the corporations and how they are positioning themselves for the outcome on either side?
Let's keep in mind that nothing is actually going to change unless you have a blue wave. Because if we have split government in any way, meaning between the White House and Congress, nothing is going to change. So what we see now with the 21% corporate tax rate, that would remain the same. However, if Joe Biden is elected and you have a Democratic Congress, then we are going to see change, particularly for corporations. And I would guess that they probably would get it passed quickly, and it probably would be retroactive to the beginning of 2021. Now, if that were to happen, Brad, I see that corporations are going to have to make some moves related to that. Now, corporations are not necessarily just going to accept that hit to their bottom line. They're going to look at where can we make up that difference. The easiest way to make up the difference is cuts related to employees. I think everyone realizes that. And as we move towards an environment of more technology where computers, robots are replacing people, I don't see why that would slow down. It would actually speed up. And I think ultimately we could see unemployment numbers not improving because of that.
We do have a report out as well that Joe Biden's proposals would increase taxes by $2.4 trillion over a decade, which is about $1.6 trillion less than previously estimated by, and partly because of the pandemic's impact as well. That info coming from the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center. As we think about and this earnings season, it's going to be tough to see how companies are looking through the trees, if you will, to to whatever they can forecast to this point in time. We've already started to get some companies, whether they be airlines, whether they be banks, trickling in with their results. And looking through into the next quarter and even into the start of 2021, that has been a toss-up because it largely hinges on the election. However, from what they can tell us right now from a corporate perspective, how would you expect companies to finish out the rest of this year? And is there any type of solid ground or footing that they could find in that time period that best positions them for the start of the next year, assuming that we still don't have a vaccine that is distributed and produced?
Depending on the industry that they're in, I think that many corporations have done a great job adjusting to our new life with the pandemic. Now, certain sectors have taken a hit when we talk about the airline industry, and it's very difficult for them to make adjustments if people are not comfortable with traveling and they're not going to go to certain areas and you have to quarantine depending on which state you come in. So there's a lot to be considered there. But outside of that, I think that businesses who've been able to adapt to what the pandemic has brought us are going to finish up pretty well through the remainder of the year, given the circumstances that we're in. And I would tell you that they may very well have a larger challenge dealing with changes in regulations and the tax law rather than the pandemic. But again, companies have that responsibility to their shareholders. They are going to do what they have to do in order to preserve profits. So I think that what companies have learned through this pandemic, they're going to take that into 2021 and beyond and figure out how to navigate through these completely unexpected times that we've arrived at, Brad.
Okay, and so we've already had the final monthly jobs situation, employment situation rather, and jobs report on a monthly basis before the election. That came at the beginning of this month. And then additionally, we've got more jobless claims number we're going to get next week's and then the following weeks right before the election that following week as well, the first week of November. And so as we're pairing this all together, and our team has got this kind of look at what we've been tracking. We've seen this subtle uptick, all making headlines 3 weeks, less than 3 weeks from the election. How's the election creating more volatility on Wall Street as lawmakers negotiate this relief?
It's like anything else. People are going to vote their pocketbooks, right? So if they're out of a job, then I would say that favors Joe Biden in terms of they're going to look for a change from the current circumstances. Now, there's good and bad news in these numbers. So we see that the jobless claims are up almost 900,000, but overall, those collecting unemployment, it's actually down from 11 million to 10 million. So there's somewhat of mixed messaging there. I still say, based upon where we've been, we're not doing poorly. Does everyone want to see things improve? Of course they do. But here is the reality. Until there is a vaccine, there is no stopping this virus. It's going to keep coming. And all we can somewhat do is perhaps slow it down. But ultimately, all of us as individuals, as well as corporations, have to learn to live with it. And that's really the challenge. And that's why I go back to adaptation is the most important thing in any corporate environment right now. How do we see our way through dealing with COVID, not COVID ending and when it's going to end? How long do we have to keep doing what we're doing successfully until there's a vaccine? I know the president has been promising a vaccine coming very shortly. Let's hope that that's correct. We've had some setbacks with a few pharmaceutical companies with testing because of health concerns. But overall, I think you have to look at it and say into 2021, without widespread vaccinations, we are still going to be looking at some very choppy waters.
All right. Sounds like one of the biggest changes I can make on my side, Dan, is just to go out and get a spacesuit and a helmet, perhaps, and just rock that for the rest of the time until we get this vaccine if I want to still be social. We'll see. Anyway, Dan, great to have you here with us today. Thanks for the breakdown. That's Dan Geltrude, who's the managing partner at Geltrude and Company, joining us here today on Cheddar. All right, guys, and